You can have more space. And then you can put them on. You ship them back, take them back. So we had Amazon today. Deliver it. Well, go to find some drugs. 2 bags, 2 drugs. That means I have to get 5 minutes.
Well, for my daughter's wedding, the dress was one that I had for a long time, but I, fortunately, because we were living with this, or, I was just able to try it on. What do you think? Yes, that was fun. And, we had to make sure that the 2 moms matched that didn't flash.
Yeah. All right, we need to go. All right, we're calling this meeting to order. We are Hillcrest Toastmasters Club 2364 in Dallas, Texas. I call this meeting to order. Let us, for an invocation, let us try to, there are 3 kinds of speeches: the speech you wish you give, the speech you give, and the speech you wish you had given. Let's hope tonight all of us give the speech we wish we had given. And we have our Pledge of Allegiance. If you'll rise if you're able to. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. And it is my pleasure to welcome our presiding officer tonight, Donovan Miller. Donovan, take it away.
Thank you, Daniel. Welcome everyone to our Monday meeting. I believe it is now officially fall. It certainly did not feel like it this past weekend, but the weather radio was going off at the crack of dawn this morning, indicating that a storm was blowing through, and with that storm came some cooler weather. Now, we do live in Texas, so all of our events have to be either spring or fall, because that's the only time when the weather is bearable. The fall events have begun happening. I believe Grape Fest was maybe a week or 2 ago. Last weekend was Oktoberfest in Addison. The Arboretum opened their fall festival. The State Fair opens this coming weekend. So all the fall events will be in full swing. Here at Toastmasters, we are always in full swing. And today, to help us with our meeting, we have a Toastmaster. Serving as Toastmaster again is Helen Mayo. She enjoys research, so it's always fun discovering facts to weave into the evening's theme. Plus, this is such a great supportive club that Helen always finds our meetings a positive experience that she looks forward to. Please help me welcome competent communicator, competent leader, Helen Mayo, to the lectern.
Hello, everybody. Looks like we have more people online than we do in person, or I guess it's tied. So my theme tonight is great discoveries and also inventions. And it has allowed mankind to set higher expectations of existence. And discoveries intertwine with inventions, kind of like Siamese twins, to give us opportunities that were impossible before. Many are still successfully working from home, something that most of us couldn't have imagined before the beginning of the pandemic over 5 years ago. And when before I retired in August 2024, my schedule was to work on campus 1 day a week and work from home from the kitchen table 4 days a week. And I would just use Citrix, go into my computer. I was able to access all my drives, all my files, I was able to also access the drives of my department, my unit, and also the entire shared files of the library. I was able to attend, I had a special campus committee that I belonged to. I was able to attend that, doing all these things virtually. And before the pandemic, how many people would have thought of going to a Toastmaster contest remotely? And some of their contests they're holding remotely now. And personally, I think it's great to see each other face to face. And in my opinion, I can look up and see David Richmond face to face just as much as I'm seeing the people that are sitting here physically a few feet away from me face to face. This is the new normal. And for some people, it's things that they had to get used to. But believe it or not, I sat on a church committee a while back, and they have been using Zoom for over 10 years. And so I was used to having online meetings via Zoom pre-pandemic. And a committee that I sat on at work, they made the decision, even when everyone was mostly coming back to campus, that it was much easier to go ahead and keep holding all these campus meetings via Zoom, because that way we have a very large spread out campus. You have to take buses and shuttles and things like that. No one would have to do that. We could all gather, all be on Zoom, all see each other, all talk, make our hand motions like I'm doing now. I think it's really cool. So we've all discovered new ways that technology has helped. And Toastmasters, I think, is also a wonderful venue for discovery. And tonight we're embarking on another Toastmaster journey. And it's a great place to discover and refine both your public speaking skills, but also your leadership. So I, of course, went ahead and Googled Toastmaster Discovery and found that there are actually several clubs worldwide that include discovery in their name. And as you guys also know, or some of you, if you don't know, you'll know now, I am a big science fiction fan. My daughter and I are huge science fiction fans. So I am going to introduce the team, our crew for this evening for the Starship USS Hillcrest Toastmaster. First up in tonight's voyage of discovery is distinguished Toastmaster David Richmond, our Wordmaster Grammarian. David, what fascinating word are you beaming into our meeting tonight?
Thank you, Madam Toastmaster and fellow Toastmasters. As your grammarian this evening, I will be listening for creative, interesting uses, hopefully very few misuses of the English language. We'll be taking notes and presenting those when called upon by the general evaluator. As the word master for the day, it is my goal I'm charged with bringing a word for the day. The word for the day is disruptive. Now, the general definition is causing or tending to cause disruption. And what I was thinking of in keeping with the theme of the day is disruptive technologies or innovation. An example would be Henry Ford's inexpensive Model T car. Other cars had been invented before Henry Ford, but his car, the Model T, was disruptive because he got it down to a price where ordinary people could afford to buy it. And that became a disruption to all kinds of markets, from wooden wagons drawn by horses to the passenger railroad industry. Even the cargo industry was completely disrupted by that. Telephones were a disruption. What was the other one I was thinking of? Email has changed the world. And as Helen pointed out, with all of our advanced high-speed data and the ability to conference in ways that used to be considered exotic in the 70s when I watched the Jetsons, we can now participate in meetings remotely, almost in person, through video and audio. Please use the word for the day, and I will take count of how many times people use it, Madam Toastmaster.
Thank you very much. Many countries in the New World and elsewhere celebrate the anniversary of Christopher Columbus's discovery of the Americas. Not America. He didn't discover the US, but he discovered the Americas. And it's celebrated as Columbus Day in the United States, as Dia de la Raza in many countries in Latin America, and as Fiesta Nacional in Spain. And the Bahamas simply calls it Discovery Day. Our next program team member, part of our crew, is Sarah Manis, who will take us on an amazing journey of discovery. Sarah, please tell us about your counter duties tonight.
Thank you very much, Helen. I am the counter, and I will be taking notes and keeping track of people's language and sounds, especially things that become crutch words or filler words when we're speaking. And I will be reporting my findings at the end of the meeting, but here are a couple overused words, such as that we tend to fill in with our sentences when we're not quite sure where we're going to go with it, but we're kind of trying to think of something to help us go along as such, using the words. I will be taking note of the words such as and, well, but, so, and and those, other crutch words such as ums, ahs, and uhs, and maybe ers. Those tend to occasionally crop up, and any repeating words such as repeating the words and over and over. I will report my findings at the end of the meeting. Back to you.
Thank you very much. Guilty. And Purushottam is not going to be able to be with us tonight, so we're divvying up our timer and vote counter duties. That I'm going to be timing Daniel while he's talking, since it's not probably a great idea for him to time himself, but he's going to be doing all the other timing, and he's going to be our vote counter. Now, the measurement of time has always fascinated people. So would anyone like to guess when the first alarm clock was invented?
Right. 1300s?
Believe it or not, the very first alarm clock, and I researched this, was created in Greece around 250 BC. And it was a water clock where there were these raising waters, and it would keep time, and eventually it would hit this mechanical bird who would then make this alarming sound. And so it was an alarm clock. And in 1577, Jos Berge invented the minute hand while he was inventing a clock. And it was made for an astronomer who needed a clock capable of accurately timing celestial events during his stargazing. So since you're going to be, and I heard it, since you're going to be basically doing most of the timing and all of our vote counting, can you please tell us your duties and how you are innovatively going to deal with the virtual and in-person ballots?
Thank you, Madam Toastmaster. I'll be timing the table topics portion of our speeches tonight. You'll be asked a question. You need to respond in 1 to 2 minutes. You can go to 2.5, but at 1 minute, I'm going to show this green card. When you're halfway done, 1.5, you'll get the yellow. At 2 minutes, you'll get the red. See that red, you need to wrap up. You got 30 seconds. You qualify once you see the green, you have qualified. I'll also be serving as your vote counter tonight. And we'll be voting on best table topics speaker. You can text me at 817-600-5292, which hopefully all of y'all have my number already in your phone, but if you don't, 817-600-5292. If you are in the room, I will pass around a little cup and you can vote that way. If there is a tie, which let's hope there's not, but if there is, I'll cast a deciding vote. Otherwise, I will not vote. Madam Toastmaster.
And tonight's speaker will again take on a project entitled The Power of Humor in an Impromptu Speech. And it's a different format than we've used before, although we did use it just a bit ago with Daniel. And I got tasked with selecting two prompts, two topics from a list of 10 speech topics. And our speaker is going to respond with a 2 to 3 minute speech for each question. And the way that I did it was I didn't want to be the one choosing the question. And so I found an online dice roller. And so I rolled the dice and came up with the two questions. And so please welcome Daniel Foyt to the lectern as he takes on a level 3 project from the Engaging Humor Pathway. And so the first question that was picked is question number 6. Your company has just announced a merger. You are asked to share a few words about the benefits of change.
Thank you, Madam Toastmaster, for that question. We have gone through a merger and there's going to be some change. As we all know, all of us, if you've been in this business for any amount of time, you know that the only thing inevitable is change itself. And I myself have found myself having to change my outlook and also being open to new ideas. And I was reminded of that just this weekend. The city of Dallas had a little international festival, and there were vendors from a lot of different countries and with different food items and art objects. And if anyone who knows me, normally I like to wear baseball hats. And I was wearing a baseball hat at this little festival that we went to. And there was a guy selling these hats. And on it, it said the words, baby, daddy. But instead of a Y, it ended in an I. And I couldn't figure out, what is baby daddy? Well, sure enough, the guy who wasn't real busy came up to me and he goes, have you ever heard, let me tell you about these baby daddy hats. And he starts telling me about baby daddy. And I didn't know what this term meant, but as it turns out, it's a rather kind of derogatory term for a young man who has maybe gotten a girl pregnant and he has not being part of raising that child. That's what a baby daddy is. Or that's what I took away from it. What he's tried to do is put the I back into baby daddy so that the hat was a fundraiser in order to provide funds for these young men to learn how to be a father. So just as these guys had to learn to take on new roles and learn a new skill, just like I didn't know anything about baby daddies. I knew a lot about hats, but I learned from this gentleman that how big a problem this is. And this is somebody who's trying to change the dynamic, change the way we look at that. So he's trying to take something bad and turn it into something good. And I had to just applaud him for his tenacity and his idea to go and help make this a better life, not just for the baby daddies, but also for the children that they are fathers of. So here we are now going into some change. I think all of us can take a lesson from this, learning to accept change and bring it into our own lives. Madam Toastmaster.
Excellent.
Okay.
And now. So this time I rolled two six-sided dice. And the question that it chose for me was question 8. Your club is holding an open house. You were asked to share a short speech about your experience in Toastmasters and how it has enriched your life. Take it away, Daniel.
Thank you, Madam Toastmaster. There were 10 questions. She picked probably the easiest one that was on there. I've been in Toastmasters for about 5 years and maybe a little longer than that, maybe 6. And when I started in Toastmasters, I used a lot of ahs and ums. I'd stand up here and not really know what to say, but this all goes back to why I joined Toastmasters in the first place. I have a daughter. She was engaged to be married. They were having an engagement party. And it came around time to toast the young couple. My daughter was in law school. All of her friends were young attorneys. I was one of the few people there that wasn't in school or wasn't a would-be attorney. And they gave some marvelous toast, excellent toast. Any one of them probably could have joined Toastmasters and fit right in right away. When it came my turn to give a toast to my daughter, I spent some time looking at my shoes, on and umming, and I blurted out a little toast and it was okay, but I left that night thinking, wow, I have to up my game. I've got to do better than this to make my daughter's wedding a happy and joyous occasion. I walked into a Hillcrest Toastmasters meeting knowing that this was my only goal, was to give a toast at my daughter's wedding. Gave a couple of speeches in Toastmasters, started working through my pathways. 6 months later, the big day came. And Allie, my daughter, looks at me and said, "Dad, would you like to say a few words?" This was at the rehearsal dinner. And I'm not going to say I nailed it, but let me tell you what happened. The next day at the wedding, there was an aunt of the groom who I had never met. And she came up to me and she said, "Danny," family calls me Danny, "Danny, I have been to a lot of weddings. That was the best toast I have ever heard." And I knew right then I had nailed it. I could not have done that without Toastmasters and without all the support that I've gotten from Hillcrest Toastmasters. That is my story. And thank you for letting me share. Want me to do one more? Okay.
Except that.
Thank you.
on this. Well, I will say that on top of everything else, you qualified in time for both of them. So congratulations. You did. First one was 3 minutes and 6 seconds, and your second one was 2 minutes and 35 seconds. So perfect. Absolutely perfect. So now moving along to only slightly paraphrase the prologue of one of my favorite programs, Public Speaking, The Final Frontier. These are the voyages of the starship USS Hillcrest Toastmasters, our ongoing mission to explore our talents, to seek out new life, new speeches, and new table topics, to boldly go where no one has gone before. Discoveries can involve a short walk down the hall to your laboratory or a long journey, like a trip to the moon. In the early 1500s, Ferdinand Magellan led an expedition of the first recorded circumnavigation of the Earth. And in 1949, the Lucky Lady II, commanded by U.S. Air Force Captain James Gallagher, became the first airplane to circle the world nonstop. Table topics take us on their own unique voyage of discovery as we are challenged to bravely proceed in the direction that tonight's table topics master chooses to point us. Our table topics master this evening is Chris Yang. One of his mottos in life is failing to plan is planning to fail. I really like that. Some would say table topics portion of the meeting allows for no planning, but in reality, this exercise allows us to plan for those moments we need to think on the fly. He looks forward to hearing some responses on the fly from his fellow club members. Please help me welcome to the virtual lectern, Toastmaster Chris Yang.
Thank you, Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters. I like to stay on theme when it comes to table topics, and I made a list of 5 questions related to innovations and discoveries, and there's one question that I was really looking for, and it's in this book called Tribe of Mentors, written by Tim Ferriss. And let's see my notes. So Tim Ferriss, he's a American entrepreneur. He's an investor. He's an author. He's a podcaster. He's a lifestyle guru. And he's been nicknamed the greatest human guinea pig. And the reason being, he's interviewed the most successful athletes, scientists, entrepreneurs, authors, et cetera, et cetera. And what he does is he helps to disseminate wisdom to the average folk, such as myself. And the question that, the way that this book is set up, he asked the same questions to probably over 200 people in this book. And the first question that I was really looking for, I got it written for the first person, and the rest of the questions are just amazing questions. And so I tossed all my questions that I had written, and I started going a little bit off topic and using some of the questions that he used that I thought played into the theme a little bit if you stretch it. And so for my first question, which is a question I initially went to the book for, is what purchase of $100 or less has positively impacted your life in the last 6 months? And just so no one gets overwhelmed with the questions, I'm going to give one answer to each of these questions. And so the first question, the answer is from Gary Vaynerchuk. He's a serial entrepreneur, and his answer was, my random assortment of 1980s wrestling t-shirts. So it doesn't have to be this profound answer that needs to be life-changing. And so that's my first question for not a lot of people to choose from. My first question is for Donovan. And again, it's what purchase of $100 or less has most positively impacted your life in the last 6 months?
Thank you, Mr. Table Topics Master, fellow Toastmasters. So I spend a lot of time in the office sitting at my desk, and I use my keyboard a lot, to the fact that I had the standard issue company keyboard, and one day I looked down, and where my fingers and actually the edges of my nails would hit the keyboard, those letters were completely rubbed off. So I thought, I just need to get a different keyboard. So I looked for one that was actually wireless and rechargeable and had backlighting, and it had a built-in wrist rest on it. And this thing has been a joy to use. And since I'm in the office using it, especially this time of year, when it gets in those last weeks and I'm spending 80 hours a week in the office, I am loving that I spent the money to get this upgraded keyboard because it has made such a difference. And then I could not stop there, so I looked over at the mouse, which was looking very sad next to its brand new companion. And I decided I needed to upgrade the mouse as well. So now I have the wireless mouse, the wireless keyboard, and I'm a happy camper working those 80 hours during tax season. Mr. Tabletop Master.
Thank you, Donovan. That answer was amazing. And I love the question because we're always told don't spend money on things you don't actually need. But when you read through this book, I mean, wrestling t-shirts, 1980s wrestling t-shirts, it reminds me of Marie Kondo. I think that's, yeah, Marie Kondo, tidying up with Marie Kondo. It doesn't matter what it is, if it gives you joy, if it gives you happiness, this warm, fuzzy feeling, maybe it's worth it. My second question is for Sarah. And I love this question. If you could have a gigantic billboard anywhere with anything on it, what would it say and why? And again, I'm going to give an answer from one of the people that Tim Ferriss interviewed. So he interviewed Maria Sharapova. She's a professional tennis player. And her answer was be original. She said it's straightforward. It says what it is. Be you, embrace you, celebrate you. We are always influenced by external events, people we might have never met, and it steers us away from what we have and should always be, which is ourselves. So for Sarah, if you could have a gigantic billboard anywhere with anything on it, what would it say and why?
Thank you very much, Chris. If I had a giant billboard anywhere, I think it would be maybe in somewhere in downtown Dallas. It's the closest area I can think of, but it would say most likely learning is magic. Never stop learning, basically. Because I have to go with Helen on this. I have always loved books. I love mystery novels. I love sci-fi novels. I like fantasy novels. I love historical fiction novels. I have learned so much, even just about human imagination, about asking questions, about learning something new every time I open a book. And then especially with a book such as a historical fiction novel. I was reading the book based off of Truman Capote's The Women. And I remember reading that book and thinking, I didn't even finish the book. I had borrowed it on Libby, and it made me go down a rabbit hole asking questions about all of these different figures in history. Who are these famous actors and socialites and public figures that have had an impact in history? What were their lives like, and how interesting it was, and how did they get there? And it really sparked my interest in learning more about fashion history and art. And I will admit, you can never go wrong if you never stop learning. Thank you very much. Back to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. What I love about that is never stop learning. Millions of people will drive by that billboard and it means something different for everyone. And you just spoke for like 2 minutes on what it meant to you and why it's so powerful to you. So thank you for that answer. Do we have time for one more?
Yeah.
All right, so we'll do one more question. And the question is, when we need to be creative and be innovative in our jobs and in our lives, we can get a little bit overwhelmed. So the question is, when you feel overwhelmed or unfocused, what do you do to help get you back on track or out of a funk? And this question is for David. And I don't have a particular specific answer, but I do have one answer that was repeatedly given and given and given from all different backgrounds. And the answer was meditation. It seemed to be a huge, huge common answer. So for David, when you feel overwhelmed or unfocused, as we all do at times, what do you do to help get back on track or out of the funk?
Thank you, Mr. Table Topics Master and fellow Toastmasters. I'm a writer, even though I'm not a writer that requires creativity in the normal sense, because I'm a technical writer. I'm trying to condense sometimes very hard to grasp information down to a level that a fairly ordinary person can understand it. It does take some effort to get that down, and sometimes it is challenging. And you do sometimes overload from the amount of the volumes of information you're getting, and struggling with how to get it down to something that is digestible to the average person. Movies sometimes are a little trite, I know, and they oversimplify things, but there was a scene I loved in Men in Black 3. Did any of you see that? There's a funny scene where they're stumped, and Josh Brolin, who's playing a much younger version of Kay in the 1960s, says, "We need pie." And Jay is puzzled for a minute, and he literally means to go to a diner and order pie and sit there and not talk about the case they're working on. Yet, of course, in the contrivances of fiction, it turns out doing that causes them to find the clue or figure out what they're struggling with in their minds. It's the next thing they need to do to solve the problem they're working on. But I do think there is a certain amount of truth to that. Sometimes you do need to walk away. Or at work, I have a rather extensive list of iTunes music I turn on, walk down to the coffee break room and do something, or just our building is rather unusual. At one time, it was the workout center for EDS, and we have a running track. Sometimes walk the track one time or two just to get your brain back in gear. Those are things that I have found are helpful. Mr. Table Topics Master.
Awesome. Thank you so much, David. The reason I love that question is we're all human. You're a CEO of a Fortune 500 company, you're a teacher, a firefighter, a doctor, it doesn't matter. We all get stressed and we all kind of address it in a similar way. We're all human. So thank you for that answer. And with that, I will return control back to the Toastmaster. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. I think that was very creative, so kudos to you. The Science Channel has published a list of the 100 greatest discoveries broken down by discipline. So of course, I looked at the medical one, and their number one medical milestone is Vesalius's discovery of human anatomy through painstaking dissection and observation. And Vesalius believed that the understanding of anatomy is crucial to performing surgery. And I totally agree. And because of the rare book room at work, I have actually had the privilege of physically handling one of the Vesalius's books from the 1500s, and the illustrations of anatomy are huge. And it is the very first time that the correct placement of the appendix was recorded, because a lot of times they would do dissections of apes or gorillas and assume that the organs would be the same in a human. Well, their appendix is in a different place. And as someone who had a laparoscopic emergency appendectomy several years ago, I am extremely happy that physicians know exactly where your appendix is sitting, because otherwise, when they were hunting it down, mine would have popped. Just as anatomy is essential in medicine, evaluations are an essential part of the Toastmaster experience. Oh, I apologize. I apologize. I meant to say that. Yes, I'm calling for the timers report of the people that gave the table topics.
All table topics contestants qualified, email or text me at 817-600-5292 with who you think won table topics. And you can send those to me directly, or you can, text me that if you're in the room. Put it in here. Madam Toastmaster.
My deepest apologies. I was going on my notes and I put my notes over there and put my new page up, and it doesn't say anything on my notes other than thank you, Chris. So my apologies. Moving right along. So our general evaluator this evening is Donovan Miller, and he is a long-term member of Hillcrest Toastmasters and values the experience of his fellow members. Despite this experience, there are always improvements to be made. He looks forward to offering constructive feedback on making our speeches and meetings even better. Please help me welcome to the real-life lectern up here, your Vice President of Education, Donovan Miller.
Thank you, Madam Toastmaster. Fellow Toastmasters, it is time for the general evaluation portion of the meeting. And we did have a speech this evening by Daniel. I will be serving also as your speech evaluator. So the first thing I will move right into is that speech evaluation. Daniel was performing another speech from the Engaging Humor Manual, and his objectives were to develop a method for impromptu speeches and practice adapting rehearsed stories. And I think he did very well at both of his responses. There were three things I particularly liked, and then I'll go into some things that he can improve. First of all, they both included personal stories. So he had this story about the International Festival, the guy with the baby daddy hats, and then he talked about the toast at his daughter's wedding for being one of the reasons he had joined Toastmasters. Second thing, they both included the humorous element. We've already talked about the baby daddy hat. That was hilarious to me. I knew what baby daddy was. I was trying to figure out how the I fit into it. And then it was excellent to hear that this guy had taken this derogatory term and turned it into something positive. And then the humorous element for the speech, I liked when he talked about the toast in his first rather unsuccessful toast, how he spent time looking at his shoes and awing and umming. I think we could all relate to that, our first few speeches, our first few times at this lectern. And then the last thing, he successfully addressed what the topics needed to be. So the first one was talking about a merger in a company. So he talked about how he had changed, how this other guy was promoting change in these fathers, and then how these employees were going to need to embrace change throughout this merger. And then for the toast, it was obvious he had given his personal experience and how he had benefited from being in Toastmasters. A couple of things he could improve. I'd watch your first impression. Both times you had your hands clasped in front And for your first response, in the very beginning, you looked a little nervous. And the second thing, don't telegraph your relief. You were relieved at the second prompt. Don't tell your audience that you just got an easy prompt. And I think the fact that you were a little more relaxed in your response made the structure of that speech a little less strong. So again, great topics, personal experiences, use of humor, addressing the topic. Just watch your first impression and don't telegraph anything in your speech, and it'll be even better. Look forward to more speeches from you, Mr. General Evaluator. Okay, at this point, I would like to hear from our program team. And I will start with our word master grammarian, David Richmond.
Certainly, Mr. General Evaluator, fellow Toastmasters. Our interesting grammar uses today are these are the ones that I heard. Dan, I like tenacity. Helen, I liked prologue, medical milestone, and the absolute mouthful laparoscopic emergency appendectomy. Chris, lifestyle guru. Donovan, happy camper, derogatory, telegraph. Sarah, learning is magic. Daniel, one thing I would suggest is when you were talking about your experience with the guy with the hat, you led off with, and he goes, instead of something more grammatically correct, such as he said. That's the only thing I really heard tonight. Our word for the day apparently didn't go over very well. I didn't hear anybody use it. Did anyone use it I missed? Well, with that, I'll return control to the general evaluator.
Now we will hear from our awe counter, Sarah Manis.
Thank you very much. I had Dan with 2 ands and two instances of repeated words. Helen had 2 us and 2 instances of repeating words. Chris had 3 instances of repeated words. Donovan had 2 extra so's and 2 extra instances of repeating words. David had 1 instance of repeated word, and that is the rest of my findings. Back to you.
Thank you, Sarah. Couple of thoughts on the meeting. We did start on time. We did need the recess. Pretty light crew this evening. I thought, having as few people as we had, that table topics was going to be a little bit stunted, but there were great questions in table topics. Everyone participated. So I think that we were able to successfully fill that time. I liked the theme, and Helen did a great job weaving that through each of the parts of the meeting, talking about different discoveries, talking about her love of science fiction. Also like that David worked his word of the day also back into the theme. As far as improvements, I think we just need to have more members in attendance. I know we've had some people calling out at the last minute on the last day. It's a little bit hard to get those roles filled. But other than that, I think we do a good job of pulling together, substituting and filling in. So another excellent meeting, and thank you for those of you who had attended. That's my findings, and I will return control to our Toastmaster, Helen.
Thank you so much. Toastmasters can take you on a journey of self-discovery. It does require hard work, innovation, and commitment. You're rewarded with a sense of accomplishment, and I still find this club to be wonderfully supportive. I've enjoyed that since I joined, and I continue to join that very much. our last discovery of the evening, I want to call our vote counter up to announce tonight's award winners.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Toastmaster. It was close. It was a close vote. But tonight, our best, we'll forego best speaker, best evaluator. I think we know who those are. But our best table topics tonight goes to one Donovan Miller. Woohoo! All right. Yeah, thank you. Madam Toastmaster.
It's been a great meeting. I hope we all continue to discover the speaking talent within each of us. But now it's your time to return control of the meeting to our presiding officer, Donovan Miller, who was just up here, and now I'm going to make him come back up here. We need a tesseract to get you up here.
Thank you, Helen. Excellent meeting. So our schedule for next week, we have as our Toastmaster, Heidi Jordan, table topics as Sarah, general evaluator Daniel, wordmaster grammarian Amy, all counter Helen, vote counter and timer Chris Yang. And our presiding officer will be Amy Gow. I know that dues are due, so if you have not paid, please make sure that you get that to Amy Gow. You can pay online. You can self-pay through Toastmasters International and then get the club dues to Amy later. If you want to pay for the full year, we're discounting to 145. I know I still need to do mine. We collected from Ken Agnew, who was an old member who is continuing to pay. So glad to have that. So if you haven't paid yet, you can also look online to make sure some of us are already paid through the next period. So you might already be paid beyond that. You can find that in Toastmasters International as well. Does anyone else have any other business? Daniel?
Since we're finally. One thing that happened while we were away was we have some certificates to hand out that we couldn't do when we were meeting virtually, but Helen Mayo has been elected as our secretary. The nice thing about these certificates, though, if you ever forget what your job is, it prints out what your position is in Toastmasters and what is expected of you. David Richmond, I have one for you as well. I will give it to you the next time you're here. And one Donovan Miller, our VP of Education. Once again, if you forget what your jobs are, you can look right there and read all about it. That's all I have.
Thank you, Daniel.
David's,
VP of Public.
okay.
All right, any other announcements? We will be back here next week. Have we reached out about October dates? Okay.
But we'll be here.
All right.
Taking any days off.
We are taking off the 14th for, as Helen mentioned in her presentation, Columbus Day. All right, if we don't have any other announcements, I'll call this meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Night.
Have a good one.
At all. Why can't I?